Hello and welcome to Dice and Demons. I'm Emma, and in this video I'm going to talk about getting into Warhammer Age of Sigmar 4.0 and especially how to do that if you, like me, are not great at learning new rules or getting into new game systems. And I have a couple of tips that I hope will be helpful to you. It's something that I have been trying out, and I have found it helpful at least. So I thought I would give the tips to you, and then perhaps you could use them for yourself. So I'm really excited about Age of Sigmar. I love Age of Sigmar, and I like 40k as well, but I think the game system that will probably always be closest to my heart is actually Age of Sigmar, just because if I have to choose, I am gonna choose fantasy over sci-fi. Nothing wrong with sci-fi. I'm just more of a magic and dragon kind of person than bolters and spaceships. So yeah, fantasy it is for me. So it probably comes as no surprise to you that Warhammer Age of Sigmar 4.0 has just launched, and with that, even if you are an experienced Age of Sigmar player, you will have to learn a whole ton of new rules and ways of doing things. And especially if you're a newer player, it can all seem a little bit overwhelming. Oh, and before I get too far into this video, if you think my voice sounds a little bit rough, I have a cold, so that's why. I'm sorry about that. That it is what it is. So I really suck at learning new rules, and perhaps, I'm not sure, perhaps it has something to do with the fact that I have ADHD, and so I have a hard time focusing on stuff and just sitting down and concentrating for a long periods of time. Or perhaps it's just that I'm not quite bright. I don't know. The end result is the same anyways. New rules are just really difficult for me to learn. If I just sit down with the rule book and go from the first to the last page and try to understand everything and take everything in, I will of course understand some things, like the general gist of how things work, but like more specific rules that you actually need when you're playing a game, they're not, I'm just not gonna be able to remember them. I'm not going to be able to focus on them, and thus I'm not going to be able to use them in a game before I have played many games. And most of those games I will have been either quite dependent on having an opponent who knows the rules, so they will help me remember, or I will just be looking more in my rule book than I will actually be looking at the tabletop, which is perhaps not that fun for either one of us. So for this version of Age of Sigmar, I thought I would try to do something else, and what I have come up with is trying to do my own cheat sheets. So I know there will probably be places online pretty soon where you can find sort of automated cheat sheets made for you if you just put in your army information and so on. But I think there are at least 3 benefits to making your own, even though it's a little bit more time consuming. And I just quickly want to go through them here, and then I want to give you an example of how I have done this. I have tried it out. Some of these things I've tried out in a game yesterday, and I found out that while the cheat sheet worked, I needed something that was a little bit more specific. So I have made that now, and I'm going to show you. But the 3 benefits I can think of is, well, one, which is probably the most obvious. You have a reference sheet handy while you're playing the game, so you don't have to look everything up in your books or on your warscroll cards and so on. And so that just makes things a little bit more easy to manage and makes everything a little bit more quick until you have memorized the entire thing. For me, I don't think that will ever come, but for some of you, maybe you are better at remembering stuff like this than I am. And the second benefit I can think of is that it forces you to actually look in depth at your warscroll cards and on your like battle traits and formations and so on. Because at least if you're like me, I can read a warscroll card pretty quickly. I'm a fast reader, but that doesn't mean I really take it in If I'm just reading these cards at home, I mean, to be honest, I'll probably just skim through it, even though my idea was actually to read it and learn it. That's probably not what I'm gonna do unless I have a specific reason to, which I have when I make these cheat sheets, because now I need to understand every single piece of information available on the warscroll card and put that in my cheat sheet. So it just forces me to really pay attention to the details and actually use them for something, and that is quite helpful, at least for me. And the third reason is that if you make your cheat sheets yourself, they will be specific to your needs, which means you can put in the information that will be necessary for you, that will be helpful for you, and the information that you don't need, you don't have to put in there, and so it will not be confusing to you. And so I think the cheat sheet might work a little bit better and might be a little bit more easy for you to actually use as a reference when you're playing a game. Because I have been playing Age of Sigmar since I think 2.0. I played a lot of Age of Sigmar 2.0 and I played a few games in 3.0, but not that many. But still, I have a general idea of how the game works. I know how the phases work. I know how it works when you're casting a spell or making a move or a shooting attack and so on. So those things I don't need to include on my cheat sheet, because those I actually have managed to memorize, and so that would just take up a lot of space that I don't need it to take up. So you can make it as specific and as short or as long as you need it to be. So anyways, those are my my top 3 reasons for spending the time and energy on making your own cheat sheets. So let's take a look at what I did, and perhaps that can work as an inspiration for you guys. Just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about cheat sheets, and it has actually nothing to do with cheating, it is just a quick reference guide, but for some reason it's just often referred to as a cheat sheet. I don't know why. Anyways, these are a couple of warscroll cards from my army. I play Seraphon, because who doesn't like lizards riding big dinos, right? Here you can see, these are some of the perhaps more complicated models that I can use in my game, and the warscroll, I think, has actually been laid out pretty well by GW. You have the title of the model, and then you have the circle divided into 4, where you can see the move, the save, the objective control score, and how many wounds it has. And then you have the weapon profiles, and then you have all the abilities under that, and then you have the keywords at the bottom of each warscroll. And it's really well made. It's nothing like that. It's just I have a hard time remembering it, especially because a lot of these models have abilities that will be used in different phases, and so you need to sort of just look through all of your warscroll cards if you can't remember it, to check if they have any of them have an ability that triggers in a particular phase. And it's just very time consuming, and honestly also a little bit confusing, at least to me. I get easily confused and distracted, like at the best of times, but especially if I'm playing a game, there are just so many things going on at one time that I just often quite lose track of what I'm actually doing. So you can see, for instance, on the Saurus Old Blood on Carnosaur, so that's the big T-Rex model that the Seraphon has. It has a passive ability where if it's really badly damaged, one of its melee weapons will have 1 less attack. And then it has another passive ability that triggers on the charge, but only for friendly Saurus units, so like other lizard units. Then it has a passive ability that will affect the control score for enemy models that are in combat with it. And then it also has another ability, sort of an active ability, that triggers in any combat phase, but only if this model is in combat with an enemy monster that has already been damaged. So a lot of different abilities going on at one time. and at different phases. And this is, I mean, if I only had this one model in the whole army and then just some battle line units, then it would be easy. But of course, in a 2000 points army, you probably have more than one complicated war scroll. So you can also see my Slan Starmaster, so that's my wizard frog. He has also got a ton of different abilities. He's got some weapon, like the melee stats. They're not that important. If he gets into melee, then you're probably gonna lose him pretty soon. But then he has 3 different abilities that are relevant for your hero phase, because he's a wizard, and all of those are they're fine on their own if you can remember them, but some of them also has to do with other units. So for instance, he has one where that's called Arcane Vessel, where he can sort of shoot his spells through a skink wizard, so increasing the range of a spell. And you need to remember that also when you're positioning the units, so you don't accidentally put a skink wizard too far from him if you wanted to use it like that. He also has a spell on his war scroll card, but you also have a spell lore that is available to all your wizards in your army. And there are just a lot of moving parts in this and a lot of things you need to remember. You can also see under his keywords, he's War Master, Hero, Wizard, Infantry, he can fly, and then he has Ward 6+, which means that all the damage points you have taken in your damage pool, you roll a dice for each, and on each 6+, that damage point is removed from the damage pool. But if he is within 3 inches of another unit called Sauros Guard, he then has a 5+ ward save, but it doesn't say anywhere on his war scroll. So if you're gonna remember that, you also need to look at the Sauros war scroll card before you do the ward saves for the Slan, for instance. And all these sorts of things, these synergies, just make it a little bit difficult to remember all of it. And so trying to make a reference sheet to make it a little bit more easy to manage, I think can be a really good idea. So here you can see one of the cheat sheets I have made, and this is for my Seraphon army, and it's for a 2000 point list that I have built for a game this upcoming Tuesday. And I have written down all the information I thought would be relevant for me to have sort of for the army overall. So I have put down all the information about the battle formation, battle traits, heroic traits, artifacts, spell lores, and manifestation lores. And then I have also written some important synergies that I need to remember, because I don't often remember that. So when I set up stuff, I often get confused and just a little bit stressed out, because I don't want my opponent to have to wait for me for, half an hour to make a decision. So often I just make a decision because I have to, and I'm not quite sure what I'm actually doing. So I thought it would be helpful if I wrote down which models have synergies with each other, and so that would perhaps make it a little bit easier for me when I'm actually going to be deploying my units. So you can see, for instance, my Slan and my Star Priest and Troglodyte and Realm Shaper engine, that's the faction terrain for Seraphon, they all have some synergies that work well together in the hero phase. Then I have the Slan plus Sauros Guard, so that's what they can give both of them a 5+ ward if they're within 3 of each other. And then the Carnosaur and Sauros Warriors, where he could give them a +1 to charge in the charge phase. And then, because I also often just pick what I'm going to be charging or shooting a little bit randomly, I have written down those units where I thought it was most important that I tried to select the most appropriate target. So for the Croxagores, that would be infantry, because they have anti-infantry on their melee weapons. Then I have the Carnosaur, he's gonna be really good against monsters, especially damaged monsters, because that was one of his abilities. Then I have a Troglodyte, and he is good with multiple units, because he can give up to 3 enemy units a debuff if he is in combat with them. And then I have a Stegodon, which has anti-monster when shooting, and has an ability that can hurt infantry when it charges. So just to make it a little bit more simple for me to perhaps look at this just before I start the game and have an idea of what I'm actually doing instead of just doing stuff randomly because I get stressed out and confused. These next 2 slides are the references I'm going to be using during the actual game, and I have put them down into a Word document, and it's just 1 page, so I don't have to flick through anything. It's just there and ready for me to use. So I have something for the start of the battle round or the turn, where I'm remembering how to get command points, and also I've written like you get 4 command points and then you get +1 if you're the underdog. You have to choose a battle tactic, and you can't do that on the double turn. And then I have to pick a new asterism. It's a bonus thing you can get for a Seraphon. You need to fulfill some sort of requirement for you to be able to do that, but I have to remember that it's a possibility at least. And then I have something for the deployment. I need to deploy my faction terrain, and it has an ability where it can give enemy units some mortal damage if it's within 24, if the terrain piece is within 24 inches of the Realm Shaper engine and the enemy units are within 3 inches of that. So when I place it, it would be best if I don't just place it like 25 inches from a really good terrain piece where a lot of enemy units are crowded around, for instance. I also have some units that can be put into ambush, and I have a lot of stuff that I can do for the hero phase. As you can see, I have all sorts of things I need to remember that I can potentially do. All the units I can cast with. The Carnosaur can heal because he's got an artifact. I need to activate the terrain piece, and I need to activate some endless spells if I have those. And I have also written after a hero phase rally 1 CP any, which means you can use the command ability rally for 1 command point, and you can do that in any hero phase. And then you have the ability to use magical intervention, where you can cast a spell in the enemy hero phase for 1 command point at -1 to cast. Or, I mean, it gets more difficult for you to cast the spell, but still you can do that in the enemy hero phase if something is really important for you to do. And I have done the same for the movement phase. You can also see you can do at the double, where you just run 6 inches instead of rolling a d6. And you can do redeploy, where you can move in the enemy hero phase. I need to remember that I can teleport. I have the models I've set up in ambush. I can put them, can put them up on the tabletop, and I need to do that turn 1, 2, or 3, because if I get to turn 4 and they're still in ambush, well, then they are just destroyed. So that would be not quite bright if I forget all about them because they're not actually on the tabletop, and that can happen to me a lot. So that's why I have written that specific information, turn 1, 2, or 3, on the reference sheet. And it's the same for this last picture here, where you can see I have put in all the command abilities you can use in the shooting phase, charge phase, and combat phase, and end of turn. And then I have also put in the sort of passive abilities that some of my units have that I know I will otherwise probably forget. For instance, my Carnosaur will ignore save modifiers, and if I have cast the Purple Sun, it will give a debuff to enemies within 3 inches, so a -1 to save. And that goes both in the shooting phase and the combat phase. It's just a passive buff that the Purple Sun gives. But I have placed the information in both of these phases because, again, those are the relevant phases, and even though I could just try to remember that a Purple Sun just has this ability at any given time, I don't think I'll be able to remember that. So that's why I've just copy pasted that information to both phases. And as I said, these are the relevant information for me. These are the things that I'm most likely to forget about or be confused about. And so that's what I have put into this reference sheet. But I think this will be different for any player. So if you are going to try this, I think you should try to work out what will be most beneficial to you, or just try it out, make a reference sheet, see if it works. And if you have too much information there, so it gets too crowded and not that easy to actually use as a reference, or if you have not enough because you find yourself flicking through the rule book and the warscroll cards and not being able to remember when to do what, then perhaps you should put more information into your next cheat sheet. As I said, this is a cheat sheet I have written for a specific army list. So of course, if I change the army list, then I will also have to change the cheat sheet. I think a lot of the things here I can just reuse, so I won't have to start completely from scratch. And the more games you play, the less information you will need to have on your cheat sheets. And so the less time and energy you will need to use to make these. But I think just for getting started with the game, getting started with the new version of Age of Sigmar, this can be pretty helpful. So I am curious to know what you guys think of this idea of making your own cheat sheets, even if there are places available where you can get an automated one made for you. If this is something you can see yourself using, or if you have any cool ideas for different ways of getting into a new game system, learning your rules, memorizing stuff, and not being confused by all the moving parts when you're playing a big tabletop game. Any sort of ideas or suggestions you have, please put them in the comment section below so that other people might use that as inspiration for their games, because just because this is the way that works for me doesn't mean that it works for anybody else. So any sort of tip you can give would be really appreciated. And as always, before you leave, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the wonderful people who support Dice and Demons over on Patreon. So thank you so much to Thomas Madsen, Gwenna L, Jordan Hollands, Queen's Wolf, Double J's Terrain, Mola, Steve Eberly, Nassim Makaya, Andrea Correa, Anthony Polcastro, Bosworth the Rogue, Mando Project, Starcon85, S. Bear, Economicus, Elliot Philby, Dr. Tom Zimbardo, Cyber Fossil, Cinnamon Coffee 87, Terrainery, Joshua and Anya Pavelczyk, Charlie Robertson, and VT Knight 007. I will leave a link to my Patreon in the show notes, so if you would like to join in supporting Dice and Demons, you can do so there. Also remember that you can follow me as Dice and Demons over on X, formerly known as Twitter, and on Instagram if you want to stay up to date on my painting projects. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!